Good morning. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Hannah Booth and I'm the Communications Manager here at Moorepay. It's my pleasure to introduce the topic to you for today, which is HR Essentials, examining the feasibility of the 4-day working week. The idea of the 4-day working week has captured the public imagination, and it's a concept that's also been supported by the TUC. In fact, Francis O'Grady said that in the 19th century, unions campaigned for an 8-hour day. In the 20th century, we won the right to a 2-day weekend and paid holidays. So for the 21st century, let's lift our ambition again. In today's webinar, Michelle is going to examine the sustainability of the 4-day working week and its effect on productivity, work-life balance and stress levels. I'm also delighted to tell you that we have a case study from Pursuit Marketing, who have gained national coverage after moving to a 4-day working week. Lorraine Gray, a director at Pursuit Marketing, will describe the benefits this brought to their business and how they went about implementing the 4-day working week. So before we begin, I have a couple of housekeeping points to run through. We have nearly 250 registered attendees for this webinar, so to keep things manageable, the mics are muted. But that doesn't mean that you can't contact us throughout the webinar. You'll see there's a chat box and questions box within the viewing panel of GoToWebinar. You can use the chat box to let us know if you're facing any difficulties in viewing the webinar. In preparation for the Q&A session, please post your questions into the question box throughout the webinar and we'll cover as many of them as possible at the end of the presentation. Also, we'll send you a recording of the webinar and a copy of the slides afterwards. In terms of the structure of the webinar, I'll begin by providing an overview of Moorepay for those of you who aren't familiar with the business. Then I'll introduce our host for today, Michelle Hobson, and after the main body of the session, we'll come to the Q&A period. So, about Moorepay. I'd like to introduce Moorepay as a business, as I'm conscious that not everyone on the webinar is a customer of ours. We're a payroll and HR solutions business. We were established over 50 years ago and have 10,000 customers across a range of industries. On a monthly basis, we produce approximately 500,000 pay slips and we handle around 12,500 payroll and HR queries. Essentially, we're the market leader in HR and payroll services to small businesses. Our promise is to make payroll and HR easy, and we do this by 4 key elements: simple onboarding, easy to use software, rich functionality, and flexible services. This wheel summarises the products and services that we offer, and if you'd like to find out more about us, you can go to moorepay.co.uk, where there's lots of information on our services and solutions. Moving on, I'll now tell you a little bit about today's host, Michelle Hobson, our HR Technology and Services Director. She joined Moorepay in 2017 and is responsible for running all the HR services activities in Moorepay, which includes our technology, our HR and employment law. Michelle has 15 years of both operational and strategic HR experience, and as you'd expect, she's CIPD qualified. You can contact Michelle via email and you'll also find her on LinkedIn. I'll now hand over to Michelle, who will take you through today's topic, examining the feasibility of the 4-day working week.
Thank you, Hannah, and thank you everyone who's joined this webinar. These are always really interesting topics to cover and the ones that we get the most attendees on, and it's great to be able to talk about possibilities for the future in terms of HR and the way the world is moving. So just to go through the agenda then, we'll talk a little bit about the background and why this is becoming such a hot topic. We'll go through a couple of case studies and we've actually got a guest who will be joining us to talk about a real life scenario where this has worked, which is really exciting for us. Talk about the pros and cons of 4-day working weeks, because we all know that it is not just as simple as, okay, everyone has a certain day off and off we go and everything continues as normal, and you've got to weigh up what is right for your business. Then we'll talk a bit around managing pressure and stress effectively, because a lot of the focus on a 4-day working week is about alleviating that for our employees and a real focus on well-being. And then we'll cover off a couple of points on the law side of it, so talking about working time and rest periods, and then talking about alternative types of flexible working, because if this is something you decide is not right for your business, then what are the other things that you can think about to help tackle this potential issue of stress and pressure and long working hours, and we'll finalise that all with a Q&A. So do pop your questions in the question area, and we will answer as many as we can at the end. So talking about productivity of UK workers, it is said that British workers are putting in the longest hours in the EU, but are on average less productive. It's a really increasingly important and interesting topic around productivity and how to get the best out of your employees. And times really are changing. There's a main focus now, and I think if you look on LinkedIn, every second or third article will be something to do with mental health, well-being, balancing your work and life, a home life. And there's lots of different ways this can be achieved. But this session is really going to focus on the 4-day working week, and that is one way that you can achieve some of that better balance. So analysis by the TUC that was published in April, as I've said, found that British workers are putting in the longest hours across the EU, and full-time employees in Britain are working on average 42 hours a week, which is nearly 2 hours more than the EU average. And over a course of a year, that's equivalent to 2.5 extra weeks. And the TUC General Secretary, Frances O'Grady, you will see the quote on there that, and I have to agree with some of this, around the British long hours culture is nothing to be proud of. It is robbing workers of a decent home life, time with their loved ones. It's contributing to overwork, stress and exhaustion, and that's become a new norm. And they are quoting that it is time for change. And other countries that have shown reducing working hours isn't only good for workers, it can boost productivity. And I think that's the key thing in all this. Whilst as employers, we are now trying to shift our focus to make sure that we are getting the best, giving the best for our employees, we have to make sure that it works for the business as well. So if there's a real tangible business pull around productivity with reducing working days, then it's definitely something that we should be looking at. The TUC also say that these long hours culture is just not having a positive impact on businesses across the UK. And in similar economies to ours, workers are much more productive for every hour they work where they're reduced. So they are massively supporting efforts to reduce working time in the coming decades. And as Hannah mentioned at the beginning, it's looking at what is possible. Let's stretch those limits and go beyond what is the norm, just because this is what's been done for the last however many decades or even centuries doesn't mean that that's what's got to happen in the future. And it's about questioning and pushing those boundaries. So I think it's worth starting with some fundamental questions that a business would need to ask itself before even thinking about a 4-day working week. This is not something that is straightforward, nor is it something that needs to become overcomplicated. It's finding that right balance. And there are pros and cons to consider when assessing if this is something that's feasible. And some of the questions that we pulled out that really should be thought of right at the beginning. The first one there is, does reducing the number of days employees work tackle the problem of low productivity and excessive stress? And it's going beyond that and asking yourselves, is the number of working days in your organisation what is causing low productivity and excessive stress? There may be other things as well, but what information have you got to support that? What surveys have you done within your organisation? What do your focus groups say? If you've got focus groups, what do your employees say? Is the number of working days contributing to that? Are you trying to solve the right problem with the right solution? On the opposite side of that, does a 4-day working week mean that work intensifies to an unmanageable level and people are feeling that they have to cram 5 days work into 4 days? Does it have kind of a detrimental effect on what you're actually trying to achieve? What effect would it have on your organisation's culture? And to answer that, you really need to have a clear understanding of what your current culture is like. What's your organisation like now? What are the norms that have developed over time? What is your business like? And then you can assess what impact you think it will have, and will that ultimately be a positive one? And then the last fundamental question on here that we just call out is, what will it do with recruitment and retention? You look at the generations that are coming through university now, and they are being brought up in a very different world, a world with technology, a world where it is okay and it is good to talk about people's mental health and well-being, and it is good to have a focus on home and work life and have a balance, and are probably a generation that aren't afraid to talk about it, as past generations may have been. So what are they looking for with recruitment and retention, and how are you going to get the best people that are out there? Is this one way to do it? So whilst they're all great in terms of questions, the next piece then is moving on to a couple of case studies, because I think it's really useful that we can talk about the theory, we can talk about the questions you need to ask, alternatives, how you could go about implementing it, but to talk about some real life case studies where either these have been implemented or it has just been considered. So we're really pleased to be able to introduce to our broadcast today Lorraine Gray, who works for Pursuit Marketing as Operations Director. Now, this is a case study that's very close to Moorepay's heart because we are a customer of theirs, and they have moved to a 4-day working week, and Lorraine has kindly agreed to talk about her experience with this. So first of all, welcome, Lorraine.
Thank you.
So it'd be great if you could just give us an overview of how this all started. What was the first thing that you think about moving to a 4-day week at Pursuit?
Of course, well, we began this initiative back in 2016. In the summer of 2016, we were going through quite a difficult period within our own industry. There have been quite a few elections. There's a bit of, I guess, unrest within the market space. And being a marketing service provider for some businesses, when they're looking to streamline costs, marketing could be one of the first things that take that hit, unfortunately. So what we had to do as a business was make sure that we were sticky and that our customers wouldn't consider switching off our services. To do that, we wanted to make sure that we could retain and keep the best possible staff, and that we continue to achieve our guarantees around our service levels and our customer return on investment. So that was a key priority for us. There were some big technology vendors also moving into Glasgow, so some global software companies opening offices here and offering, in some cases, slightly higher salaries. And what we wanted to do again was to protect the staff that we had with us for 3 years and had invested heavily with in training. So we knew we had to do something a wee bit different to stand out from the crowd, ensure productivity was as high as it could be, and that we had staff retention that would ensure that continuity. We looked at the productivity of our team across all functions, and what we discovered was that key staff members who actually already had reduced working hours and with flexible working actually achieved the same, if not more, than those working a traditional 5-day, 40-hour week. So dug a wee bit deeper into that and spoke to those individuals, and we found out that really those people who were rushing off for the school gates in the afternoon, or were starting a bit later because of perhaps care for an elderly relative or another commitment, when they were in the workplace, they were just a bit more focused to get what they had to do completed, so that when they did leave, they weren't worried about their workload, and they could leave and spend that quality time with their loved ones or whatever they had to do during that period. So it got us to looking at generally a working day, and if we all look at our own working day, there will be times where we could be more productive, whether that's joining meetings we perhaps don't have to be in, a bit more chat around the water cooler, could be as simple as that. But if we are productive and focused, we do tend to achieve more. And I think key to this is being able to measure performance and know what success looks like for each individual in each function. So we looked at that and we thought, if reduced working hours can work for these people, why can't it work for everyone? So we ran a small trial with, I think, 15 or so staff members, and in 2016 there was 45 of us at that point. We ran a trial with 15 of us and had huge success. Everyone responded really positively to it, as you can imagine. So there was no compressed hours, no change to business hours Monday to Thursday, no change to salary or benefits. In fact, we slightly increased salaries to make everyone really comfortable that this wasn't a cost-cutting exercise. And instead we just made Fridays were off. So everyone could enjoy a long weekend every weekend, and we get done what we have to achieve Monday to Thursday. Obviously the response to that was great, results were fantastic. So we rolled it out across the business in September 2016. Initially, productivity spiked by about 37%, and that was taking into account the lesser hours. So it was a huge uplift in activity for us. Over the last 3 years, that has settled to around about the 30% mark. So there's a bit of a case of novelty at the beginning, and people have been really excited by it and wanted to make sure it was an initiative we continued. And that's now settled to about a 30% increase over the last 3 years. Our business has grown significantly. So at that point, it was 45 staff. We now have just over 180 staff with offices in Glasgow and also in Malaga in Spain. And for us, it's been really exciting to bring the 4-day week to the Costa del Sol, because there they have traditionally very long hours, breaks for siesta, which no one really takes anymore, and quite low pay. So for us to bring our workplace culture to Spain has been really exciting. They're all loving the 4-day week, and we've been able to attract some really good, strong talent in that area. In terms of well-being and the impact that's had, Michelle, you touched on mental health and well-being as a whole, and that was something we were very, very conscious of and always have been. So this to us is part of a wider and comprehensive well-being programme. So our staff, for example, have free breakfast every morning. Studies show that people who have a more nutritional breakfast are more productive throughout the day. So they have a free breakfast in the morning. But what that provides time to do is we open the office 45 minutes earlier. They can come in, help themselves to breakfast, and have the social engagement with their team. What we didn't want to do was lose any kind of cross-departmental relationships and general chat, because people were maybe just so focused on trying to get out the door on a Thursday and enjoy that 3-day weekend. And that's worked really well in retaining those relationships and retaining that social aspect of the workplace culture, or certainly contributed to it. We also have lunchtime gym classes, fitness classes, so our staff who participate in these classes, which are free, and we have free gym memberships too, they get an extended paid lunch break to take part in those, and that's about splitting up the day. So if you've had quite a rough morning, go to the gym at lunchtime, you come back in the afternoon energised and ready to attack your day. And again, we found the people who partake in the gym classes are significantly more productive than those who don't, and it's just about re-energising and refreshing the mind and not getting that kind of 2 o'clock sugar slump or post-McDonald's slump, and actually coming back and ready to take on the afternoon's challenges. There's a whole host of other programmes and initiatives we run. The 4-day week's obviously been the most successful in terms of engagement with our team, attracting talent and retaining talent. So in sales and telemarketing and our call centre function, churn is something that the industry faces on a kind of yearly basis. In the last 18 months, we've had 2 staff leave pursuit, and that's highly unusual within our market space. And those that have left have gone on to progress careers in the field sales. Well, one has, and one's gone back to university. So we're confident that the workplace culture we've created and the balance that our team have ensures that we can retain the best possible staff. We're also attracting some fantastic talent, because we've got people who were really successful within other businesses but made the move to Pursuit to take advantage of this. So it's been a great, from a recruitment perspective. We no longer use recruitment consultants, so we've been able to save bottom line costs for that, and we've been able to grow our business from 45 to 180 staff organically, with people applying to our website every day because of this brand that we've created.
That's amazing. I mean, the benefits there are clear to see. There's an amazing amount of benefits, but I guess from a practical point of view, how did customers react to Pursuit being closed on a Friday?
Our customers were actually very positive about it, and 2 or 3 of them have now adopted it themselves, which is nice to hear. It's also to secure new business. So one of our largest customers is Google, and we deliver campaigns for Google now in 32 countries worldwide. But they're obviously a progressive and dynamic organisation themselves, and always looking at ways of innovating around workplace culture. So it was actually between us and one other company they're benchmarking against, and because of the way we treat our staff and the well-being, they knew that they could rely on our staff to deliver for them, and that's why we won that contract. It's one of the certainly one of the key contributing factors to that. So not only are our existing customers happy with it, it's also helping us to secure some new business too.
That's really interesting. And thank you very much for that. There may end up being some questions at the end that we might need to come back to you, but thank you for that overview. It's really good to get a real life example of where it's been really successful. So thank you very much.
No problem at all.
Thank you. So moving on then, I guess to put a realistic spin on this, there's the flip side of a case study where this wasn't implemented for various reasons, and this is with the Wellcome Trust. So last year, one of the UK's leading charities, the Wellcome Trust, actually kicked off an organisation-wide consultation on whether to implement a 4-day week with no reduction to pay. Clearly, the benefits are obvious, as Pursuit have just been through. And the Wellcome Trust moved to a 3-month study, and it gained an awful lot of interest for such a large and respected organisation to consider moving to a 4-day week. Could have been a real game changer. And they again were looking at, could we improve both productivity and well-being of our staff at the same time, improving the overall impact we have as a charity. However, the Wellcome Trust decided against it. And when asking the question why, it was actually mainly from the employee engagement within the consultation period. So employees were actually worried that their workload being compressed into 4 days would make things more difficult for them. And there was some part-time workers who were concerned about how it would affect their existing arrangements. And others thought the move may distract the charity from its core work. And ultimately, they decided to scrap their plans for a 4-day week for 800 head office staff, by sort of summarising by saying it would be too operationally complex for them to implement. But I think the thing here is that it won't work for everyone. It can't work for everyone at the moment. So I don't think we're in a position where any time in the next few years this is going to be made a compulsory law across the UK or anything. And it's good to see it from both sides, but it's making sure that you understand what's right for your business and giving the implementation consultation the right level of consideration when deciding whether it's right for you or not. So just to kind of move on then and go through some of the pros and cons, you've heard straight from Lorraine about the pros of this, but it's worth just recapping at a higher level. And the first one is the one that we've been talking about for this session, which is around productivity. Sometimes when staff are working 5 days a week and then you've just got that 2-day weekend, employees can end up feeling tired, overworked, and that actually lends itself to being less productive. We've all been in that situation where we have felt ourselves that we are not being very productive, actually because we have too much work to do, which doesn't sound like it follows on, but we've all probably been in that situation. But productivity isn't just about the hours an employee works, it's about the work that they do when they are here and about their overall well-being and how they feel about achieving that work. As you heard as well, it is can have a massive impact on recruitment and retention. It can reduce recruitment costs because 1, employees are less likely to leave, and 2, when candidates are in the marketplace now, we know that the world is changing and they are looking for more than just a job with a certain type of salary. They're looking at the benefits that come with that job. They're looking at the flexibility that comes with that job. They may be looking to the type of organisation that they're working for, the corporate social responsibility that that organisation take. What's that organisation culture like? Times are changing, and a 4-day week certainly has a lot of pros for somebody who is out there in the marketplace looking for a job and can help retain that competitive advantage, attracting and retaining that best talent. Employee wellbeing, 3 days off at a weekend or 3 days off as part of your working week gives employees more time to take up their interests and spend time with their friends and family, relaxing and ready for the week ahead. And the last one is around presenteeism. So the rise in technology has made presenteeism worse because we live in a world where employees can respond to emails regardless of the time of day, the location, regardless whether they've taken a day off to be at home or they are on a holiday abroad somewhere. Emails and responding to work emails is at the touch of a button. But a 4-day working week helps to move that emphasis not from the hours you do but to the output, and can help separate that work and home life a bit more and make sure that the time that you are there and when you are present in work is the most productive and therefore best for the organisation. But flipping onto the cons then, and there are some things that need to be considered and to be called out. And one is around employee stress levels. So obviously moving to a 4-day week, you are trying to combat employee stress levels and make sure that they don't feel as stressed and they feel that their well-being is taken care of to allow them to be more productive. But there is a risk that if not done in the right way and if not monitored and productivity monitored and the health and well-being of your staff monitored, it could actually have the opposite effect and lead to heightened stress levels due to work intensifying during those 4 days to an unmanageable rate. You've also got to think about the company culture. If work becomes so condensed that an employee's core focus is to arrive, do their job and leave, what of that then gets pushed out? Is it the sense of community and the sense of company culture, forming those social bonds, the other benefits that individuals gain from attending work on a more frequent basis? And that's why it's important to realise, as Lorraine said, that this isn't something that can happen in isolation. And you've also got to call out that this doesn't suit all job functions and it doesn't suit all working industries. You know, it might not be practical for retail, healthcare, manufacturing, just to say that there's 1 day a week that this business is shut, and you've got to look at the practicalities of that. And then the final one is the complexity of implementation. As we've just said, the Wellcome Trust decided against this because they said it would be too operationally complex, and there is a lot of considerations to make, not least contractual and legal changes from an employment law status, but also the servicing of your customers. What is your obligations with your customers, and can you manage those in a 4-day week? There are lots of things to consider on the flip side. To call out then, talking about stress, because this is one of the key areas that you'll be trying to tackle when moving to a 4-day week or considering it. But it's looking at what is your motivation for considering moving to a 4-day week. If one of the primary reasons is to reduce stress, and I imagine in most cases it would be, you've got to realise that this isn't the one silver bullet that will just make everything perfect within your organisation. And ask yourselves the question, will the 4-day working week address the problem of excessive stress that we're trying to answer? If it isn't implemented correctly, it could lead to more stress with employees, as I've said, trying to squeeze 4 days work into 5. And it's about looking at how you can manage those. I think it's important to note that if you decided to implement a 4-day week, you've got to consider what other initiatives that you need to put around this to make sure that your company makes the best of it, and that there is still best practice for managing stress within the workplace. And the things to look at are making sure that communication is there, whether it's a 4 or a 5-day working week, ensuring that there are open lines of communication and honest communication with employees between themselves and their managers, and they're encouraged to raise issues as they occur and allow them to be dealt with. It's important to make sure that managers are trained. They are your key resource in an organisation. They are the ones at the front line of dealing with the stress of their employees, and it's helping your managers spot the signs of stress at work and allowing them to have the confidence to deal with difficult conversations. Looking at what policies you've got in place, how do you manage overall well-being and stress? Have you got the right policies and procedures in place for your organisation to deal with it? And then if stress situations do arise, it's making sure that you've got backups of services like occupational health, where an occupational health company can give you guidance and advice on how to handle a particularly different situation. So moving on to the last couple of sections then, I think it is worth calling out some of the information on the working time regulations and reminding you that by the law that we have in the country at the moment that's governed by the EU is that employees can't work more than 48 hours a week on average, although an employee can choose to opt out of that. And also making sure that we understand the breaks. there needs to be an uninterrupted break of 20 minutes within any 6-hour working period. So where people are working 4 days, it's making sure that you still give those the right breaks and the right time away, making sure that none of these working time regulations are not breached if you move to a 4-day working week. And then talking generally about flexible working requests. So this is a bit of a different one, but where employees themselves may request to work a 4-day working week. All employees have the right to request flexible working once they have 26 weeks continuous employment. Employees have the right to request, but they do not have the right to demand it. And employers must follow the correct process and give the request due consideration. And it's about changing times. There have been times in the past where there was an automatic no to flexible working requests because it was seen that it would be a very difficult thing to manage. Employers can say no, but they must have a sound business reason. And I think, again, the world is changing and we are challenging that norm that flexible working isn't the right thing to do. And it's encouraging businesses to think about the broader benefits that flexible working can bring. So if you had one person who was asking for it. And then just to finish off, it's thinking about what alternative types of flexible working there are. So 4-day working week is one that is prevalent in the press at the moment, and I think will continue to gain traction. It will, more companies will introduce this, but it will happen over time. But if you as a business decide that that is not right for you for whatever reason, there are other ways that you can help people get that better work-life balance and focus on their well-being. And some of the things on here are things to consider. Working from home. Technology now allows people to work from wherever, whenever they want. And it is allowing people, if you can, the flexibility to do that and seeing the benefits from it. An alternative is to work compressed hours. So you still work the same amount of hours in your week, but you can compress it into shorter overall days. So it might be 5 days into 4. And some people find that beneficial, that they would rather do longer hours in one day to allow them 1 day off a week. Flexi time, where employees can bank time, which means that they can come in later when they need to, or stay later, or make those hours up. There's also the thing of staggered hours. So you might have sort of set shifts within your workplace, which allows somebody to work 8 till 4, or another person 10 till 6. And we actually have this within some teams in our own business where we need phones covering between 8 and 6, and we have allowed the teams to decide between them with some guidance over who does what shift. And we have people who have got obligations with elderly parents who would rather come in early and leave, say, do 8 till 4, go home and help their elderly parents. Or we have people who would rather do the 10 till 6, which means that every morning they can do the school run. And it's another option to consider. And then job sharing, where you've got people who do want to work part-time hours, is job sharing an opportunity. So there are a number of other things to look at when thinking about flexible working. So that brings us to the end of the main presentation. There was quite a lot covered, but hopefully you found it useful to think about some of the benefits, hear from a real life example of where it has gone well, know the sorts of things to consider, and then understanding the alternatives. I think we have got quite a few questions, so I will just nip through them now and see if there is something that we can answer. We've just been asked some practical questions about, will we share the deck? We will share the recording, won't we, Hannah?
We'll share the recording and also a copy of the slides after the webinar, so you will have those to refer back to.
Okay, so I'll just go up to the questions. Is there a trend of the types of business markets that are not comfortable with implementing a 4-day working week, and if so, why? I think that, to be honest, this 4-day working week is still in its infancy, and I think the areas that it is gaining traction in is sort of the technology focused businesses or marketing type businesses. And some of the more traditional type industries would find it more difficult. So if you think about manufacturing or retail, I think there are studies out there that you can read on the internet, and I think if you googled this, Pursuit would be one of the companies that would come up, and I'd encourage you, if you can, to go and read the press reports about them, because I think it's really interesting. I do think there is a tendency at the moment that it is happening in more sort of not the traditional type of industries, but that may change over time. But it is really a watch this space. It's looking at where it has been successful and seeing if that can be implemented. Because, you know, the truth at the moment, it's not something that our own company are looking at, because we provide a service at the moment that our customers want 5 days access to with payroll and HR services. And we actually, on some of our services, operate 24/7 where we have people on call. But that's not to say in the future, as time starts to change, that we might not look at it, but it's not something that we're considering at the moment. So I do think there are certain industries that it is more prevalent in, but it may change in the future. We also have a question here around, could Moorepay help with contractual changes if our business decided to implement a 4-day week? Absolutely, yes. Obviously, there are many other things to consider as opposed to just the contractual employment law changes. But we have a HR team and policy team here who would be able to help you with the practicalities of what that would mean.
We've also had a question that I think Lorraine may be able to help with. So Anna has asked, does the 4-day week mean that employees do less hours, or does it mean that they essentially just do compressed hours? So would it be that they would work longer days for the 4 days that they are for the 4 days? Would they just work their standard hours that they were working previously?
So in our case, we didn't compress hours at all. We kept our hours Monday to Thursday the same, because for us it was important to say that this wasn't about trying to squeeze more into one day, and we thought that might actually increase stress levels, and people already had commitments around childcare and such like, so there'd be a wider consultation needed, I think, to do that. For us it was about literally just giving them this additional free time, whether it's from a mental health perspective, for self-care, or more time with family, or at the gym. You know, that's their choice. But we were very clear with them that the Monday to Thursday hours would actually remain the same.
Thank you. We have another question here from Paris, which says, can you allow people to choose a day that they're off, so the office can stay open 5 days a week, but individuals can choose when they work the 4 days? I would say that is absolutely an option. Pursuit chose to have a fixed day off, which I imagine would minimise the kind of administrative disruption, but allowing people to have different days off during the week so that the office is still open, that would definitely be an option. It would just probably involve a little bit more coordination about who has what day, but it's certainly an option that I think a business should give consideration to whilst they're going through some kind of consultation period. I'm conscious of time, but I'll just do one more question that we've got on here that says, flexible working would be difficult in our industry, so are there other ways that we can tackle the same issues around things like well-being? And as I said, we appreciate, in the same as for our industry at the moment, it's not an option to do 4 days. In general, you've got the other options of flexible working, as I mentioned on the last slide, that you can consider. But it's not just, that isn't the only answer to helping people manage stress and productivity. There are numerous other initiatives that you could put in place that focus on health and well-being, and what support you put in place. And I think there is countless opportunities where you can still tackle the same issues, but in a different way, if you feel that flexible working is difficult, if not impossible. I think there was another webinar that we've done recently on mental health and well-being, and if you go onto the website, you can see the view of that, can't you?
Yes, you can.
So I'd encourage you to go and look at that in terms of other things that could be done to tackle the same issues.
Brilliant, thank you, Michelle. Before we finish, I'll just make you aware that in terms of connecting with Moorepay, there's a whole host of resources on our website, like Michelle just mentioned. We actually do, for example, a monthly employment law and HR legislation guide that you can access. There's blogs on various different subjects, and any previous webinars that we've done, you can also access recordings on those as well. If you follow us on our social sites, we publish all of our new blogs, guides and webinars on there, so you'll see them flash up on your news feed. Thank you to everyone for joining the webinar today, and a special thank you to Lorraine at Pursuit Marketing as well.
No problem. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So as I said, I will be sharing a recording of the slides, and also